first report came in from Brooklyn Park, a tornado on the ground near 85th and Zane. It was the starting point for a destructive and frightening path through the northern Twin Cities suburbs. Our helicopter captured the frightening sight as the twister continued on the ground and through groves of trees, neighborhoods, and businesses. And as soon as the tornado passed, people began coming out of their shelters to see the destruction and look for the injured. Tonight, authorities in the area still assessing the damage from the tornado that passed through our community between 5 and 6 tonight. The destruction stretches from the touchdown point to where it lifted off the ground once again near Mounds View. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we try to assess the damage from this evening's encounter with a tornado. What we know so far is that there was a long path of destruction, but so far no reports of any tornado-related injuries. 2 people were hurt sailing on White Bear Lake, but that was caused by a lightning strike. Now, one of the worst places to be during a tornado touchdown is outside, near water, but that's exactly where our first guest was. He is a college student from Arkansas, used to seeing tornadoes from much too close. A communications major. He is going to college here. He's captured some pictures with a borrowed videotape camera. He is Mark Carlson. Mark, thank you very much for coming here. You are acting as a lifeguard down at Moore Lake, which is above 694, out toward the Anoka County Airport, where we saw it. Tell me what you saw and what gave you the idea to take the pictures you did.
Well, first off, we were sitting there and we see lightning coming down. We have to get the people out of the water. And a friend of mine, Ed Jones, saw the tornado first off. And at that point, I decided I'd run in and get the video equipment and get up on top of the lifeguard shed.
Now, I think we ought to tell the people that you just happened to have that videotape equipment. You had borrowed it from store communication, from a cable outlet, to do something on your own.
I'm an intern for Local Origination Channel 3 through store cable. And I was going to do a project today, but it was too humid for the video equipment to work, and it just happened to work at the same time the tornado came down.
You mean it had not worked for you until the tornado?
It didn't.
My goodness. Now look at this. Now the area that we see this tornado is over that clump of trees is actually shooting across Central Avenue out into the northwestern area, if I'm not mistaken. What were you thinking when you shot this? Look at this. That's massive.
Well, the first thing I thought is, God, very few people get to shoot this kind of stuff. And I had the equipment right there, and I just couldn't believe I had the equipment.
But Mark, weren't you afraid it was going to turn and come at you?
No, I'm pretty familiar with tornadoes, and I know they travel from southeast to northeast, and that was pretty far away from me.
We ought to talk about that. The reason you are familiar is because you have lived for the past several dozen years or so down in Arkansas, Tornado Alley. You've seen other tornadoes. They tell me that you and your buds used to get on top of the dormitory and bet on when those tornadoes would touch down.
And that's not really a smart thing to do, but it was a kind of a source of entertainment for us, so that's what we used to do.
My goodness. Besides allowing us to show these pictures, what do you intend to do with the videotape you have here?
I'm going to show it to my instructors down at Arkansas State University. I think they'll be pretty impressed that I even had a camera at the time.
They used to tell us it's better to be lucky than good.
I think I was pretty lucky, that's for sure.
But you weren't frightened at all?
No, not at all.
Did you see any damage that was being caused?
At some points we could see some debris coming up, but we really couldn't see anything because of the trees that were in the way.
My goodness. Well, thank you very much. Mark Carlson,
Thank
you have something now on videotape to remember the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing it with us and with our audience. The videotapes show the frightening power of a tornado that passed through our area tonight. The damage is even more clear at ground level. Now, Mark Watts is at the site now of some of that damage in the Brooklyn Park area. Mark, what have you located?
Hi, Don. First of all, the scene behind me tells much of the story. It's an area known as the Highlands of Edinburgh, a residential section located just east of 85th and Zane. We have seen several houses that have received extensive property damage. One house has shifted completely from its foundation. Another brand new structure had most of its windows broken and is in complete shambles inside. 2 boys were in the house at the time. They took cover in the basement and they were not injured. Debris, tree, and shingles are everywhere around Brooklyn Park, and some residents have already started to rebuild. The tornado also hit several homes that are still under construction. But again, no injuries, a lot of damaged spirits here. Yet, Don, the residents out here in Brooklyn Park remain positive. They've seen the damage the tornado caused from other parts of the Twin Cities, and they're saying just thank God it could have been worse.
Is there any way of determining, Mark, why there weren't any injuries? Did these individuals in this edition that you're in, did they see the tornado coming? Did they take shelter?
There are several people that said they saw the shelter, and in fact, saw the tornado, and they did take shelter. Of course, there were several warnings. There were 3 tornado warnings out here in Brooklyn Park that gave the residents living here a very advanced warning, and they did take the proper coverage.
My goodness. Now, that truck, which is behind you, Mark, that was flipped by the power of the tornado?
Yes, it was. It's a Creek Woods truck. It's a home builder out here in Brooklyn Park, and the owner of the truck just walked by. He didn't even know it had happened. He arrived here about 5 minutes ago. As you can imagine, he was very surprised.
And now you've assessed some damage around the area beyond what we've seen on the videotape. While you were talking, we were showing the people at home videotape of some of the rebuilding and some of the damage going on. How many houses altogether do you think just in your area?
Oh, there's about 20, I would say. But I want to emphasize that about 10 of those, about half of those, are homes that are still under construction. Many of them have been purchased, but they're houses that are still under construction. The walls and some of the roofs are just now being built, and a couple of those are leveled. And it's, again, though, they said, thank God it's not as bad as some of the damage that the tornado caused to other parts of the Twin Cities. The spirits remain positive.
All right, Mark, thank you very much for your report. Our special report on tonight's tornado will continue in just a moment. We are going to return once again to our live cameras in the field. We have 2 reports. Pat Kessler will join us first with the story of those who got out of the way. He'll then turn it over to our very soggy reporter, Terry Sater, for more on the damage.
Well, Don, it's a situation that everybody dreads, a disaster situation. It's an emergency. There are hundreds of people. Split-second timing is needed. That's exactly what was faced by the people over at the Northtown Shopping Center. Well, when the warnings hit around 5 o'clock, the tornado sirens went off and the tornado was coming. The managers got on the loudspeaker system over at the Northtown Shopping Center, and they herded everybody into the middle of the shopping center itself. What they did was order all the stores closed immediately. That did happen, and everybody just got in the middle and waited and waited and waited. They waited for about an hour and a half while everything was calming down outside. We were told today that they could hear the wind swirling outside. They could hear a lot of different things, but that was the safest place they could be. At this point, not much happened at the Northtown Shopping Center. This must have been about 5 minutes after 5. Everybody was kept in their place, however. No one really panicked, we're told by the managers over at Northtown, and everything went pretty much smoothly the way tornado drills are supposed to go, except this was the real thing. We also talked to people outside. A bus driver, for example, who was driving a bus full of people near the Northtown Shopping Center. About a block south of that Northtown, I should add, the tornado actually hit and cut a swath east to west just south of the Northtown Shopping Center. The bus driver said no one in his bus panicked. Everyone was kind of amazed to see a tornado at all. He let everybody out and they headed for shelter. Well, Terry Sater, as you mentioned, is with me, the very soggy Terry Sater. He's been out for a couple hours. He's got a story, an amazing story about a man who escaped a tornado. Terry?
Pat, when we arrived on the scene, it was shortly before 6 o'clock. A man was standing next to his truck off to the side of the road. The truck had been turned over. He was a Northwestern Bell employee. He had been inside of the truck when the tornado passed over. It lifted up the truck, flipped the truck over a couple times, and he was able to get out of the truck uninjured. What you're seeing here is this neighborhood here on Highway 132, the intersection of East River Road in Coon Rapids. People are wandering the neighborhood, looking at the damage. Many of these trees in the neighborhood are very old, will not be able to be replaced. Fortunately, there hasn't been a lot of homes damage up in this area. There is some damage, as I said, from debris from trees and boards flying in the air, but most of the homes seem to be intact. And here's the gentleman who tells us his amazing story of how his truck had been flipped over. What happened? Can you tell me a little bit more about what your thoughts, what you were thinking while the tornado was going over the top?
Didn't really have time to think. It happened pretty quickly.
And what happened while you were in the truck again?
The twister lifted the truck and rolled it over a few times. if anybody's out there driving around, I'd say stay home.
Well, we were going down East River Road, and we just seen the tornado form. We seen it, you know, it was up over in the west, and, you know, all the cars were stopped. And we were just sitting there, you know, we seen it on the ground and shingles flying all over, and, you know, half foot up in the air, kind of starting to form the body of it.
As you can see here, there's that warehouse again that was heavily damaged by the tornado. The doors were blown off. You can see a section of the roof that was also taken off. The tornado, as we said, took a fairly wide swath here in the Coon Rapids, Brooklyn Park area. Here's some more of the home damage that was done in this area. Right behind us is a home where the garage was ripped away. The owner of that home says she has a brand new car in that garage that was uninjured by the storm. She was in the house at the time the storm passed over, had seen the trees from the side of her home being pulled out of the ground. She yelled down to her kids who were already in the basement, told them to stay down there, and then went to the basement herself. She said she heard a tremendous wind, a swirling noise, and the damage apparently happened very quickly after that. Her garage was blown through, debris all over the neighborhood. Amazingly, it doesn't sound as if there were any children out playing at the time. No one here was injured. And as I said, most of the damage here appears to be trees down in the neighborhoods, but none of the homes have any major damage. Back to you, Don.
All right, Terry, thank you very much, and to Pat Kessler for both of your reports. For about an hour tonight, Dr. Walton and I flew by the seat of our pants while the tornado moved through town. Walt has had a chance to catch his breath, and he joins us now. And from the Weather Service, I understand you have the exact chronology of exactly what happened.
Okay, well, it's going to become more exact as the evening wears on, but the Weather Service has taken some initial damage surveys. The apparent touchdown was at 4:50 this evening. That was about 85th and Noble in Brooklyn Park, where there were 8 homes damaged. The Weather Service reacted about as quickly as it is possible for humans to do so. The sirens were fired and the warnings were issued at about 4:53 to 4:54, so 3 to 4 minutes delay, which actually is very good when you consider all that has to happen to issue a tornado warning. At 5:11, then, the tornado was located at 75th and Main in Fridley, 5:13, University and 78th in Spring Lake Park, at 5:18, Highway 10 and Snelling, and at 5:23, the tornado apparently lifted off in the Fridley area. The tornado was a skipping type. In other words, it didn't stay continuously on the ground, and it also broke up into what we call multiple suction vortices, which are sort of like mini tornadoes inside the main vortex. We don't have, as far as I know, any reports of people injured by the tornado, although there's 2 people hospitalized now who were struck by lightning on White Bear Lake, and there was a lot of lightning with the storm. There was definitely the one major tornado and possibly a second tornado touchdown very briefly, but we'll have to take a look at that later on. Answer the question, where did it come from? Well, there's many answers to that question. One was from one large parent thunderstorm. But if you go back and look at the regional weather patterns tonight, it was absolutely classic. This is one that goes right in the textbook. There was a frontal boundary that was stretching right across Minnesota, separating us from that warm, tropical, steamy air that we've been broiling in for the last few days. To our north, somewhat cooler, drier air. Tornado and severe thunderstorm watches were out for at least the western portion of the metro region at the time the tornado formed. Now, if you just look at the high temperatures today, you can see that there was a tremendous amount of energy in the air. The temperature soared into the 90s over much of southern Minnesota, 95 plus to our west and east and southwest. Again, just go down the checklist of where do you get tornadoes, and that's one more. Dew points. Some of the muggiest air that I've ever seen in this region. Dew points hit 80 degrees just north of the Twin Cities this afternoon, and that is the moisture in the air is the fuel for the clouds. The more moisture, the more energy that can be wrung out of the air by a developing thundercloud. So right at that point is where we had a tremendous amount of moisture. Then the other missing ingredient, which suddenly became supply, was a strong jet stream streaming through northern Minnesota up at around 20,000 feet. And you just check off your list, and this is starting to say tornado all over it. And the real question is, where is it going to be? I might add that right now we do have some more severe weather watches out there. There is a tornado watch in effect for portions of east central Minnesota and western Wisconsin until 10 p.m. There are no warnings in effect at this moment, though. Also, severe thunderstorm warnings are in effect for portions of northeastern Wisconsin. Now, let's take a look at the storm that did it. Here is a large line of very heavy thunderstorms associated with that front, but it was just south of that major line, right over the metro area, where one relatively small, isolated, but extraordinarily intense storm developed. This is also a very common pattern to get one cell outside of the main line of thunderstorms. This is the one that went tornadic. It went from essentially just a small cloud to a full-blown tornadic producer in less than 10 minutes' time. In the stages of tornado development, the first thing that happened was a funnel. We got a report of a funnel in the air at about slightly before 4:50. The tornado came down to the ground. It was a relatively narrow tornado. Its path width was less than 100 yards at all point, but it stayed or skipped along the ground for a full 33 minutes. At one point, it broke up into what we call these suction vortices, several smaller tornadoes, which you could see on some of the earlier tapes, which rotated around, and when those hit something, that's what caused the damage. But on the whole, the entire path was relatively narrow. And this is a real close-up view of one of these tornadoes that breaks up into the mini tornadoes, and when you see the tapes, you look for that feature. It's very classic. Near the end of the tornado period, it went into what is called the rope stage, the decaying stage of a tornado, and that just had one very small spot right on the ground, maybe only a couple of feet wide, before it finally lifted back into the cloud at around 5:23 this afternoon. This is the general path, and it's interesting to note that in the last several decades, many of the tornadoes that hit the immediate metro area have moved to northern Hennepin, Anoka, and Washington, and Ramsey County. Why? I haven't the foggiest idea. Maybe just statistical chance. Current radar, though, shows the cell that caused all the damage has now moved north of Eau Claire and is weakening. We have some rather ugly-looking stuff on the radar. Most of this is false returns, however. There are scattered thunderstorms up around St. Cloud and in the northern metro, but they're just scattered thunder showers. And right now, there are no warnings in effect. I'm happy to report there's still a watch, but I suspect things are calming down just a little bit for the rest of the evening. So that's what it was you saw.
Quite a day for you, quite a day for people out in Brooklyn Park and Anoka County.
I think I'd prefer to be here.
Well, glad to have you here, and thank you for your expertise. Well, I mean that sincerely. We're going to continue our tornado special report in just a moment. Another man who rushed to his video camera when he heard of the tornado is Minneapolis resident George Thompson. And from his 30th floor apartment in the Loring Park area, he saw what we want to take a moment to show you. George, thank you very much for coming in here. You have your camera here sitting on the desk in front of you. How long have you had that camera, George?
I just bought it last night.
You bought it last night.
It's some of the first footage I've ever taken.
We want to look at it. You shot it from downtown Minneapolis. We're going to roll the videotape and see what your first venture in movie making came up. Oh, look at this. Now, this is from downtown Minneapolis all the way out, looking at that tornado in Brooklyn Park. In the background, of course, you hear the sirens. Did they go off pretty promptly in Minneapolis?
No, they seem to go off probably 5 to 10 minutes after I started filming this tornado.
But those were the Minneapolis sirens?
Right.
Okay. What were you thinking when you saw it?
Well, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to run away or whether I wanted to stay with the camera, and I kind of did both.
Well, how did you detect it? Did you hear something on television or on the radio, heard the sirens, or did you just simply look out your window?
Well, this footage in particular is from the second time the tornado came down, and I had heard the sirens for the first time, and I had watched it, but I wasn't able to use the camera. But I did catch it for the second.
At approximately what time? Could you guess?
This was about 5:10.
This was 5:10, so it was the second time it came down.
Right.
So you had watched it?
Right.
Come down once and then retreat, and this was the second time? Now that's the reason I stumble at that is because that's kind of new information that it retreated twice, so we didn't know that. So you bring us new information.
Well, I had lost sight of the tornado, and I had gone back inside, and when I went out and checked again a couple minutes later, and it was visible again. And so I assumed that it...
Are you glad you bought the camera, George?
Oh, sure I am.
What are you going to do now with this videotape?
Well, it's going to be something I'll probably keep for a long time.
Well, we thank you very much for sharing it with us and with our audience. That's amazing. I guess we're going to learn a lot more about tornadoes as more and more people buy these things. Thank you very much, George. We want to take this moment to get an update on the power outages in the Twin Cities, substantial. On the phone, we have NSP spokesperson Tom Boucher. Tom, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Tom, tell us what you have out there.
Well, I hate to contradict you, but it appears less substantial than we thought originally. We did lose the services of 2 major transmission lines, but fortunately we have backups for those, so that did not result in any outage. We do have, of course, outages in the immediate area where the tornado went through. I would estimate 900 to 1,200 customers right in that area. We do have 1 feeder line out and then several smaller outages. So far, the damage to the distribution system, however, appears to be very moderate. I only have reports of 3 to a half a dozen distribution poles down in the area. So considering how long that tornado was around and how long it's been on the ground, it looks as though we got by with moderate damage to our system. People in the area, however, should expect to be without power through the night. We'll do our best, but when poles are down and wire has to be restrung, it will take a while. So they should probably plan for the worst, and hopefully we'll have the power back on sooner.
Tom, do you have any explanation whatsoever for what probably turns out to be a phenomena that 33 minutes on the ground the tornado does as little damage as you report?
Well, I was watching Dale Dobish as you were, and it appeared that it was moving through areas where we wouldn't have a lot of distribution. And then I saw these two transmission lines and damage on either side, and that's when I said my phone's going to start ringing, and that must have been the area where they were hit. But it appears just, very fortunate, the path that it took and where it decided to jump and where it decided to set down, at least from our perspective in terms of damaging our system. And apparently in terms of injuries also, it was much more moderate than we would have expected.
All right, so I want to recap for you here, Tom, and tell the people that if you are without power outage, or if you have a power outage and without power, then you should sit tight, and probably sometime tomorrow you may not have power for the rest of the evening. So thank you to Tom Boucher of NSP. With us now is someone who knows what to do if you've suffered damage in a tornado, and Bob Provost is the state insurance chief. What claims have you heard about tonight, and what should those property damage people do now? The question is this. They have the roof torn off, they can't live in their house, Bob, they've got insurance, but they don't have any money in the bank. What do
Don,
they do?
first thing, I'm Minnesota Insurance Information Center. I'm not the chief for the state of Minnesota. I'm over in the private sector. And so let's get that straight, or Mike Hatch will have me quartered and drawn tomorrow.
You don't even look like Mike Hatch.
The first thing you need to know, Don, is that the policy that you have requires that you take steps to protect your property from additional damage. If it means buying some polyvinyl or some plywood to fix the property so that you don't have water damage on top of the storm damage, that's step number one. And then those items of value that may be exposed should be moved and maybe even protected from additional storm damage and possible theft damage if there's widespread area damage. The next step is tomorrow get in touch with your insurance agent, get it reported, and if you can't live in your house, let your insurance agent know where you can be reached so that an adjuster, when they come out, can notify you and meet with you to go over what the damage is.
All right.
If you can't live in your house, keep records because you have additional living expense covered.
That's the point I wanted to get to. That most standard home insurance policies cover payment for, if you can't live in your house, staying somewhere else.
That's
cover
correct.
the cost of those materials you may have to buy to patch it up.
That is correct.
All right. Well, Bob, we'd like to thank you very much for... Say your title again here.
I'm the president of the Minnesota Insurance Information Center.
Well, that sounds like the chief of insurance in Minnesota.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank
for
you.
correcting me. Appreciate it. The Red Cross is ready to assist victims of this tornado's wrath, and if you need housing or medical help, you can call the Red Cross at 871-7676. So let's wrap it up. Tonight on live television, we saw a tornado tangle its way through the northern St. Paul suburbs. It left behind memories of past tornado tragedies, but apart from the dust and debris, we leave you with a view of a rainbow, the knowledge that there is a silver lining tonight. No one perished. The cities have survived. I'm Don Shelby. Thank you, and we'll be back on the 10 p.m. report.